What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today I want to talk about a new card. This card isn't out yet. It's actually going to be coming out in November alongside Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and it was spoiled at MagicCon Vegas this past weekend, which I did have the privilege of being at, and holy cow, it was awesome, but more on that in another video. For our purposes today, I want to do a deep dive on the Skullspore Nexus. This is a card that they spoiled as part of kind of the first look for Ixalan, and I gotta say, the set looks like an absolute banger, and we've seen very few cards, to be fair, so who knows, maybe they're front-loading it, they're giving us all the goods right now, but I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to see a lot of good stuff in this set, and this is no exception. I also noticed that a lot of the cards they led with were green. I think that is largely because right now in Standard, green is considered generally unplayable. Trust me, I was trying to ladder up with a green deck earlier today, and it read like it should be great. Like, the deck really looked good, and I'm sure I could have played it better, to be sure, but in general, the amount of removal that's out there right now makes it very difficult for green to thrive. So, can that change? Well, the Skullspore Nexus is possibly a step in that direction. So this is a legendary artifact for 6 green. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness, each equal to the total power of those creatures. And you can pay 2 tap, double target creature's power until end of turn. So this thing is insane for a lot of different reasons. A lot of them, in fact. It has kind of that Great Henge text where if you have a large creature down, it becomes much easier to cast, which is also text that, like, it was an idea that was on Galta as well, the original Galta, back from OG Ixalan, where it's this incredibly expensive thing, but the generic cost can be reduced dramatically and get it to a point where it only costs 2 if you have a board state, which is pretty cool. So that's great. But then on top of it, it has this mode on it. Like, it's easy to look at the passive and think, oh, I want my creatures to be big when they die. That way I get a big creature back. And that is true. That's pretty rad. If you're in a green deck right now and somebody hits, like, with a Depopulate or a Brotherhood's End and sweeps the leg, so to speak, if this is down, all right, I'm turning my 3 or 4 creatures that were, 2/2s and 3/3s and whatnot into, like, one thing that's like a 15/15 or whatever the case may be. Like, all right, that's not bad, right? You can do a lot with that. So you have an opportunity to get something back for the investment that you had, whereas in other situations it would just be a complete blowout. So that's pretty cool. And that ability, pay 2 tap, double target creature's power till end of turn, it's easy to think, oh, if my creature's about to die, I can just make it way bigger. That way the dinosaur gets way bigger, which is true. The other thing, though, that I want to point out, that ability can be activated at instant speed, meaning if you're attacking with multiple creatures and your opponent blocks one of them, you can double the other one. If you're attacking with 2 3/3s, they only have 1 blocker, you're going to get them for 6 damage no matter what. And if they don't block, you're going to get them for 9. That's freaking awesome. Like, it's such a simple thing. And then on top of that, if you have tramplers, dude, opponent, good luck. Like, this is going to be insane. So I think that's genuinely very, very powerful if you can get it down cheap. This artifact is in no way worth 8 mana. It's absolutely not. But you should, if things are going well in your green deck, never have to pay that. And in fact, we have a lot of different ways to make that significantly cheaper really easily. Like, the first one that I want to point out is a card that we're seeing in Standard a lot right now, and one of the only things in green that sees significant play in topiary stomper. So for 3 mana, this is basically just a rampant growth, but it comes with a 4/4 body that just chills, and that body's not online for a long time as far as combat is concerned. However, well, or until you play your Invasion to Zendikar next turn, but it's usually not a relevant body until you get to 7 lands. However, if you hit Topiary Stomper on 3, you can even miss your land drop and be able to play Skullspore Nexus on 4 for 4 mana, because you have a 4/4 creature, and it reduces its cost from 8 to 4. Boom, baby. That's already looking pretty good. On top of that, we have a lot of other creatures that are in Standard right now that are even cheaper, and a lot of other creatures that just grow throughout the course of the game. They're, in your enchantment decks, you have, like, the Kami of Transience, for example. You have the Generous Visitor. In other green brews, a card you see a lot is Quirion Beastcaller. Like, the card's only a 2/2 on its face, but as you play more creatures, it just grows. And so as a result, these creatures that start small and get big can go a long way in helping the Skullspore Nexus become that 2-mana artifact that we really want it to be. So it's not that hard to get there, assuming any of these creatures can survive. So the goal is going to be in your green decks to run just a crap ton of these creatures because that needs to happen right now. We have a ton of removal in Standard. We have possibly... I've been playing Standard for a couple of years now, and I gotta say, I've never seen a removal suite as absolutely stacked as the current Standard is. We got Cut Down, we have Go for the Throat, we have Liliana the Veil, we have Sheoldred's Edict, we have The End now. I mean, there are so many, and that's just black, obviously, which is why, part of the reason everybody plays black. So... it's tough for green right now. Getting a creature to stick and survive is difficult, which is what makes the Nexus so desirable, is because once it sticks, a lot of those destroy effects all of a sudden become significantly less powerful. Yeah, you remove my topiary stomper. Guess what? I still have a 4/4 dinosaur. And if I had 2 mana open when it dies, I now have an 8/8 dinosaur. Let's go. Unfortunately, that dinosaur doesn't have trample, which is definitely a bummer, but all the same, you can still do things with it. So yeah. So that's pretty rad. Additionally, so I'm talking about large creatures that can help buff this thing. We also have, the cards that are oftentimes seen alongside Fight Rigging, your Arcfiend of the Dross, and your Devouring Sugarmaw. Those are 6 power creatures that only cost 4. And 3 in some cases, in case of like Shakedown Heavy, for example. So that can also help. If you Shakedown Heavy on 3, all of a sudden turn 4, you can double spell with the Skullspore Nexus simply being a 2-drop alongside something else. So that's pretty cool. Or you can pay to drop the Skullspore Nexus and then activate it and double the power of your Shakedown Heavy. It'd probably work better if it was an Arcfiend or something like that, where you're actually going to deal the damage. But still, you get the idea. You get the point. It's pretty darn cool. Now the other thing though that I want to point out, it does say it only triggers when a non-token creature you control dies, and the reason that I want to call that out is in order for a creature to have considered dying, it has to have hit the graveyard. So it has to be destroyed or be dealt enough damage to be considered lethal, or have toughness reduction, but whatever the case may be. Although actually, now that I think about it, negative X effects will impact this. So if you have a creature that gets taken down by, say, the Virtue of Persistence, the adventure on that, the name is escaping me right now, it gives -3/-3. Well, if I have Aquarian Beastcaller, say, it's a 2/2 still, and somebody hits it with that, it reduces its power and toughness to -1/-1 when it dies. Skullspore Nexus will see it dying with a power of less than 0, and therefore not create a token. That's something to keep in mind. Additionally, if something is about to get exiled, it will have not been considered, it will not have died. And so as a result, we may, in decks that take advantage of this, need ways to simply sacrifice our permanents. That's something that could go a very long way in that kind of a deck. And we have a card in Standard right now that doesn't currently see play in many situations, just because a good Aristocrat strategy isn't really viable right now as of this recording, but that may change in the future, and I think some kind of like Jund or Golgari deck that involves some kind of Aristocrat, maybe not Aristocrat, but some kind of like sacrifice package could be very strong. And the card I'm referring to is Corrupted Conviction. 1 mana, black, as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature, draw a card. So if your opponent throws an ossification, they want to exile your 3/3, you can simply pay 1 black mana rather, and turn your 3/3 into a 3/3 dinosaur. Their ossification doesn't have a target anymore, fizzles, and you draw 2 cards. So all of a sudden, Corrupted Conviction to counteract those kinds of exile strategies are very, very useful. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't really do much against exile board wipes, because what you're doing in that case, you're just simply sacrificing the creature, drawing a card, and with the Skullspore Nexus down, you replace the creature in play, and then that creature gets exiled by the Sunfall or the Farewell. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but at the end of the day, you get the idea. Now, another one that I think is going to be super clutch with the Skullspore Nexus, and I'm definitely going to be brewing around it, is the Valdaran Thrillseeker, because this one allows you to fling creatures at your opponent. And so even just these two together, so assuming you have a Skullspore Nexus online, you play at the Valdaran Thrillseeker, back up to targeting itself. You don't have a 3/3. At any point, you can then pay 1, sacrifice that 3/3, bolt whatever you want, a creature, a planeswalker, one of your battles perhaps, or your opponent's face, and then you get a 3/3 for your troubles. I think that's really cool. Additionally, the Skullspore Nexus can double the Valdaran Thrillseeker's power to 6 before you sacrifice it, assuming you have the mana to activate both. Then all of a sudden you're dealing 6 damage to something and creating a 6/6 dinosaur back. Also, if your board gets wiped or if multiple creatures die in combat and the Skullspore Nexus produces a large dinosaur, Veldaren Thrillseeker, as a follow-up to that, could be a way to get through those last few points of damage and end a game quickly, because you can take that dinosaur that's presumably fairly large, back it up with the Veldaren Thrillseeker and immediately fling it at your opponent's face. We also have Callous Sellsword, which is a really good fling effect, legal and standard right now, that could also fill that role. So I think the Skullspore Nexus, as part of maybe like a Gruul or a Jund like aggressive package, could be really freaking cool. Whether or not it's going to be like competitively viable, time will tell, because in the short term, it's, an enchantment, or not an enchantment, sorry, it's an artifact that is legendary, so you don't want too many in your deck, and there are plenty of board states in which you play it out and it will not help you. If you don't have creatures live and you top deck it late in the game, it is a dead card. Like, that's a huge feel bad. Like, this will not help you get back into a game from behind, which is a problem. But if you are in a decent position, this can give you the edge you need to outlast and grind your opponents. So maybe it's a sideboard card against, black mid-range decks. Maybe that's where you want to be with this. I'm not sure, but it's definitely one that I'm looking forward to tinkering with and experimenting with. For obvious reasons, Skullspore Nexus in Commander is going to be a slam dunk home run for pretty much any green deck, especially any green-black deck that wants to sacrifice things. Like, I have a couple of decks that absolutely fit the bill for this, and it's the kind of nonsense I want to jam. So I do think this card has a lot of potential, and I don't know, I want it to work. This is also one of those where I could very easily be saying it looks fantastic and I want it to work really, really badly and I'm looking forward to brewing with it. And in the 6 months after it releases, it's worth 50 cents, even at Mythic, and it just never really found a home. That's very real. That's a very real possibility. At the very least, though, it's going to be decent in Commander, I think. So it'll probably never be only 50 cents. In any event, the Skullspore Nexus, cool card. It's also going to have an alternate art treatment, which actually, in my opinion, looks really freaking good. It's definitely a play on, like, Mesoamerican, like, Aztec-style art, and it's absolutely beautiful, which makes sense, because that's the aesthetic of Ixalan, so it's really neat. Honestly, I think it's gorgeous. So, well done, everybody. Yeah, Skullspore Nexus, coming to a local game store near you, and possibly to MagicShank.com in the near future. Just saying. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out this edition of the Overthinking MTG Podcast, available anywhere fine podcasts are made freely available for you to listen to, as well as YouTube. If you want to see my gums flapping and you want to see all the cards around me, which if you're on the YouTubes right now, you're watching me gesture to all these cards very haphazardly and a little awkwardly. I'm going to be done now. So anyway, I'll catch you on the next one.